Okay, I think we're recording now. Very good, very good, very good. Um, hey y'all, Kim here. You are tuned into Kim E, the Diabetes MP, and we are back for another Lunch and Learn, okay? And if you're not aware, while I'm recording this, we're in the month of November, and November is National Diabetes Awareness Month. And actually, on the 14th, November 14th is National Diabetes Day. And also, something that's also near and dear to me is also in November is Nurse Practitioner Week, which is also, I want to say it's the second week. Yeah, it's always the second week of November. And so I am recording this on 11/11 right now. It will be next week. And yeah. So, anywho, so happy National Diabetes Awareness Month. And if you're a nurse practitioner, happy NP week. But I felt it was only right that I come on here and not just, clearly my channel, I talk about diabetes education, diabetes management, and really trying to break down these concepts for the provider, Um, and I do this throughout the year, but of course, in November, I really want to be very intentional with what kind of content I put out there because it is National Diabetes Awareness Month. And so, as I was sitting down and I was thinking about what should I talk about, because I've actually covered a whole lot. If you have been following me for any amount of time, I have a lot of videos on my channel. So if you are not subscribed, I would love to have you here and just come and look around. I have tried to organize it where there are playlists and, little categories so stuff is easy to find. But when I was thinking about what should I talk about for National Diabetes Month, because for some time now I've been online, I've been sharing content, and it's been I've done this a few times. And so I thought what was very important and what I have noticed, because it is 11/11, the month, we've been in the month for 11 days now. But I've noticed that a lot of the language is all about the diagnosis. It's really all about the diagnosis. But what about before people get there? And as I'm going to later share in my notes here, there's a lot of people that are not quite at the threshold of diabetes. What about them? Do we not say anything to them? And you probably already know what this is going to be about. It's going to be about prediabetes. I mean, you can see it in the title, but basically, I feel like before we dive into some more complex subjects throughout this month, because that is what I'm going to do. I really want to spend some time on some foundational things. Let's revisit some things and some of our foundational topics that should always be a part of our education when we're talking to our patients. And prediabetes is one of those topics. And so let's just get right into it. Don't want to take a lot of time. I already spent 3.5 minutes talking about that little spiel. So let's get right into it. I do have my notes here, and I also have a reference that I'm going to be reading from. This is the ADA. I'll show you right now. The ADA Standards of Care. This is the 2022. The 2023 should be coming out here soon. They should I actually probably need to be Googling it about right now, because they normally put it out about a month or two before the new year. And so, but I'm going to be reading from the 2022, and I'll link to this because I am a member of ADA and I'm a diabetes educator. I think I've shared this before. I'm actually on the leadership team for one of the ADA professional interest groups as well. I get a free copy. It's a big old book, but you can go online for free and read the whole document. You can download each different standard, pull which ones are relevant to you. So I'll link all of that for you all as just a reference for you. But I'm going to be reading from that today. So if you see me looking down and over and about and all around, that is the reason why. So anyways, let's get into it. First, let's talk about our stats. So when we get into like our stats, that really tells us like what it is and the relevance of it now. So simply put, prediabetes is when basically someone's blood sugar level is elevated, but not quite at the threshold for the classification of diabetes. Okay. Elevated, but not there yet. It's kind of like your warning shot. It's kind of like the harbinger of what could come if there is no interaction. And do you see how good of a opportunity this is for us? If we can identify people at this state, then we can really change the trajectory of where people go. It's not guaranteed because, hey, things happen. Some people, they will continue to develop diabetes. But are we doing everything on our end to try to slow the progression? Okay. So, like I said, it's when blood sugars are higher than normal. And so what your clinical picture is going to look like your labs, what this is going to look like is that means that the fasting blood sugar, if someone was taking their fasting blood sugar or you were taking their fasting blood sugar and they come into your office and you get the basic labs, that fasting blood sugar would be anywhere between 100 and 125. We know that at 126, that is when we diagnose diabetes, 126 or higher. So this would be right before that, 100 to 125. The A1C will be 5.7 to 6.4, which we know starting at 6.5, depending on what else is going on with the patient, you can diagnose per the standards at 6.5 someone with diabetes. When I was in school, it was always this number 77777. Well, the literature actually says, depending upon what other comorbidities the patient has, if they are at high risk, if you have a feeling or an anticipation because of the clinical picture that's in front of you with this patient of yours, that if there's a high chance that they're going to develop diabetes at 6.5 or anything up to that 7, you can diagnose diabetes. Most people, I have seen a lot of patients of mine, because I don't currently work in a role as PCP. I'm more of the educator. I'm more of the community health position. So I'm really a part of the care team that supports the PCP. Excuse me. But I have definitely seen many that it's a practice that, excuse me, that many people will start their patients on metformin, something low like that. So your A1C of 5.7 to 6.4 is what you would consider prediabetes. Now, there's a third component that I think a lot of people, unless you work, we hear this more with pregnant women when they do their glucose loaded test, they do their glucose test to check for gestational diabetes. But that is also, it's just not reserved for pregnant patients. You could actually do this in your office if you have all the materials, but a 2-hour glucose test after someone has consumed 75 grams of like an oral glucose tolerance test, that would be 140 to 199 for pre-diabetes. And for diabetes, that 200 on up, right? So that is what your clinical picture would look like, okay? Some other stats are 1 out of 3 people in America, so a third of people in America have prediabetes. And here is the gotcha there. 80% don't even know that they even have it. So just think about that. Think about the opportunity again that we have with early detection and early implementation, just doing routine care, okay? So a lot of people will ask like, well, what's really going on when it comes to prediabetes? And again, when we're talking about prediabetes, this is someone that's in line with developing not prediabetes type 2, but diabetes type 2. Diabetes type 1 is totally different. It's a quick onset. Diabetes type 2 is something that comes on over time, okay? Now, where prediabetes plays into that and what's going on in the body is we can start to understand that some insulin resistance is starting to happen, okay? It's starting to happen there. And so I've actually made a really good, I have a couple of videos where I go in depth with what insulin resistance is. So I'm not going to do that. I'll link it in the description box. But basically the whole essence of insulin with our body, glucose is a very large molecule and it just can't go across the membrane by itself. Okay. It has to be let into the cell. So think about somebody opening up a gate and letting somebody in. The gate has to be unlocked, open, and then glucose can walk through the gate. Okay. Well, what insulin does is it's part of the transport system. So it will bind to a receptor on the cell like a lock and key, and then a channel will open up and glucose can go in. Okay. When there is insulin resistance, basically there's a couple of things that could happen. Most of the time there's a defect with that binding. That insulin probably can't get into that lock and key properly, so it can't quite turn. Think about a key that's kind of stuck a little bit, and the lock, you're trying to really wiggle it and you can't really open it up all the way. So maybe the gate opens up a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't open up all the way, but it opens up a little bit, and maybe some of the glucose can get in, but not all of it can. And that's where you'll see that elevation of that glucose in the bloodstream, because all of the glucose is not getting in. It's not, some of it's still getting in because we're not all the way, our bloodstream does not have a high concentration of glucose, hence why your numbers are elevated, but not quite at the threshold yet, right? But that's how we know that there is some insulin resistance starting and that we should intervene. This is a great time for us to intervene, okay? So I'm going to pull this standards of care because I want to talk to you guys over what increases your risk. And there was a slight but significant update from 2021 to 2022's standard of care. And I do want to share that with you all because I'm not sure if a lot of people know this, okay? I think we can understand the typical risk factors, but I wanted to read off this chart. And the chart I'm going to be reading from is the table 2.3 right here. This one is for adults. This one over here gives you about children, how you can diagnose, because we know that obesity in children is a rise. And at one point in time, we only equated children with type 1, but now we're seeing such a spike with type 2. So we have to have some type of guidelines for them as well. And so here it says, let's see, criteria for screening for diabetes and prediabetes. So it's really the same. They don't make a big distinction between the two. And this is in asymptomatic adults. So this is not your patient that is coming in complaining of issues. You know, they're not complaining of the 3 Ps of diabetes, which I've made a video about that as well. This is just your average patient who's coming in and maybe it's a new patient. Maybe it's just routine labs and you're just screening them for good measure and maintenance, right? So it says testing should be considered in all adults with overweight or obesity, which is a BMI of 25 or higher, okay? And that's for everyone except Asian Americans. Their BMI, you should screen if it's 23 or higher for them. And this testing should be considered in those who are overweight or obese who have one or more of the following risk factors: a first-degree relative with diabetes, high risk race or ethnicity. So we have our priority groups, which are African American, which I actually like to say, honestly, not just African American. I like to say our Black population. Because African American, everyone doesn't identify as African American. So your Black patients, Latino, Native American, Asian American, and Pacific Islander. And so these are your high risk, high priority groups. So that is one of the risk factors. If the person has a history of CVD, cardiovascular disease, okay, if they have hypertension, so blood pressure greater than 140/90, or on therapy for hypertension. So even if their blood pressure is elevated, if they're even being treated, if you're treating them from hypertension, that That'll do it. And then if they have a cholesterol HDL level less than 35 and or a trig level of more than 250, any woman that has had polycystic ovarian syndrome, because again, made a video over that. Y'all, I have a lot of content on my channel. Okay. I got a lot of content. As I'm talking through this, I'm just like, wow, I got a lot of content on my channel. So please, if you got questions about any of this, my YouTube channel has it covered. But what I mentioned in my video, and it's just a common thing. One of the things with polycystic ovarian syndrome is insulin resistance. Okay. Because of one condition that can cause or put somebody else into another condition. And that's what polycystic ovarian syndrome is. If somebody is physically inactive, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. And what sedentary is if you are active less than 3 times a week, you're considered sedentary. So that's that. Okay. And any other clinical conditions associated with like insulin resistance. So if you notice that a child has acanthosis nigricans or something like that, or they have severe obesity or anything that that maybe they're taking a medication that would increase insulin resistance, there's a number of them, you will want to go ahead and screen them. That's just number one of this chart. Number two, patients with prediabetes should be tested yearly, okay? Women who have been diagnosed with gestational diabetes have a lifelong testing of at least every 3 years. Now, the I don't want to say the expectation, but I can't think of the word, but typically there's a high chance that women who have gestational diabetes will develop diabetes. So that is why you continue to screen them at a minimum every 3 years. It could be if they have all these other risk factors, you're screening them every year. Okay. And then for all other patients, so let's say if you have a patient and they don't have any of this, they're not overweight, they don't, that number one said if they're overweight and they have one of these below. If that's not them, if they're not a woman with gestational diabetes, if they're not obese, it says for all other patients, testing should begin at age 35. Now, last year in 2021, that number was 45. That number dropped by 10 years, y'all. 10 years. Okay. So that should give us a little red flag of like, what's going on here? Like, the research is showing us that we need to be screening. We need to be doing more early detection. And so we can implement earlier, because our country, our society, we're learning more, and we're seeing that early intervention is going to be the key. We can really we can slow the progression. We can also slow progressions of complications, and in some cases, prevent them altogether, diagnosis and complications. So that's that. And it says if results are normal, here's the note. If results are normal, testing should be repeated at a minimum every 3 years, in those 3-year intervals, with consideration of more frequent testing depending on the initial results and the risk status. Meaning that if you're screening, meaning you're getting lab work and you're screening, everything comes back, well, as long as the person is staying, of course, if something changes, you would screen more often, but you can go to the interval of every 3 years. And then lastly, of course, people who have HIV, because of the medications that they take, some of those retrovirals can cause insulin resistance as well. So that is who's at risk and who should be screening and what are our guidelines there. I really want to point out there too, and again, this is from the ADA Standards of Care 2022. I will link to this, but I wanted to point that 35-year-old that age out, because that was a change. When I read through the Standards of Care at the beginning of the year, that was the change that I saw. It went from, that was a huge update, from 45, because for years it was 45. Now we're at 35. Okay. So All that being said, you screen your patient and you see, okay, this patient is definitely categorized as having prediabetes. What do I do? What can I do now? Well, there are resources out there where you don't have to do all this lifting by yourself. For one, we're definitely going to start with our education, lifestyle modifications. Again, if you need help, if you want to go through that, I've made multiple videos over lifestyle modifications. But what I would like to point out here is, let's do more than just that normal spiel of like, you got to exercise more and eat better. You really need to spell it out for your patients what those modifications are, because they're going to have to change their way of life. That's why it's called lifestyle modifications, lifestyle changes. You got to change things that you're doing in your life. And so also in the standards of care, it maps out what those things are. You know, how often a person should be exercising, how much weight loss a person with pre-diabetes should have, even how much weight loss somebody that's diagnosed with diabetes should have. There's a percentage. And also, what kinds of foods? I get this question a lot. There's many different dietitians that are online, and depending upon, I love the different types of flavors of providers, because you have those who particularly target, Caribbean patients, and those who target, minority patients, and those who target type 1, and those who target, our pregnant patients and stuff. There's a wealth of knowledge out there all on the internet, many professionals that put on digital content, but there is not one diet that any entity is going to endorse 100%, because it's not a one size fits all. There are basic things that a balanced diet should have. We should be eating, a good, well-balanced meal. We should be drinking our water. You should be drinking enough water. A lot of people don't drink enough water, and you should be exercising. Of course, we're going to stay away from our fried foods, our fast foods and stuff like that. It's not that you can't incorporate them and have them every now and then, but that can't be your everyday. You should make sure that you have a balanced plate. ADA has great resources, the My Plate method, where you can show the patient like the place setting and how they can put up their how they can actually set up their plate. And quite frankly, half the plate is going to be vegetables. It is half the plate's going to be vegetables. A quarter of it's going to be your protein, and then you can have a quarter of it to be your carb. That is a great visual for patients, because of course they're not going to know their macros and all this. They're not going to know all that. But, talking through with that, and you can have a system how you educate people. But again, if you need a little bit more detail, check out my other videos that goes more into details, where I actually talk about that, what the standards say. But also, speaking of dietitians, get your patients over to one. There are many out there, and many of them do virtual services as well. I know a number of them that do virtual consultations. So it's not like they have to be in the same city or state with your patient. Now, there may be some type of regulation or something like that for coverage and stuff like that, but look into that, because the thing that I love about dietitians, nutritionists, is that they are really good at finding what people like and curating a eating pattern for that person. All of us can't or won't do a vegetarian or vegan diet. All of us are not going to do a pescatarian diet. Everybody's not going to do Mediterranean, because that's heavy fish and seafood. Some people are allergic to that. So then what are they supposed to eat? So there is no one diet or eating pattern. That's the better word, is eating pattern, that can fit everybody. So what that dietitian comes in is talk and get to know that person and learn what their eating habits are. Do you get up early in the morning and eat? When, and help them sculpt out how they're eating, their meal plans would be throughout the day. I love that resource, and it's highly underutilized. That's my spiel on that. And also, the CDC actually has a national diabetes prevention program. That they also have Well, they have the prevention program, and then the ADA and the ADCES, they have the diabetes self-management education program. So this one is for the person who has prediabetes, at risk for diabetes, and the other program is for those who have already been diagnosed with diabetes. So the CDC has a great program. There are many people who have started programs that they use, and they are certified through CDC, and they use their curriculum and certified through them. And I will say, and I will leave that link in the description box as well, if you want to go and just look about it and see, how accessible it is to you. It's very accessible. Many of these programs, again, are virtual. So as long as your patient has internet access, they can do it. There are some really great programs in my area here in Dallas. They incentivize the patients. There are many programs that start up at senior centers and senior like retirement homes and things like that, because I primarily see a lot of retired and elderly population. But these are good resources. It's a good resource for you to use, so you don't feel like you have to do everything on your own. But one of the things that you can do is to be the bridge for your patients. So I think that was it. Again, I don't like to go over 30 minutes. I try to challenge myself to go under, and we're right there. And so I like that. And so what I'm going to do is, I mentioned a lot of resources, and there's actually some other, I was looking at my screen here because I have another great resource that I saw on LinkedIn. That I would like to share as well. And so I'm going to have a lot of resources in the description box for you all, as well as some of the videos, some of my past videos that can go into more in detail with some of the things that I mentioned, as well as the CDC. And then, of course, the CDC program, I'm going to link that. And then I'm also going to link the standards of care that you can download or read online for yourself. And again, just let you know, the new one should be coming out 2023 soon. So just be on the lookout for that as well. But that's all I have, guys. And again, this is National Diabetes Awareness Month. And so I'm going to come back and just talk about different foundational things. Next week, though, is going to be it's going to be interesting, because I received a comment on my YouTube page, which it's a common misconception, and I wanted to bring it to the public. I'm not going to name the person. I mean, it's a teachable moment, because this is something that I've heard so many of my patients say, and I've had to, really undo some miseducation and really unpack things for people and help them understand. But stay tuned. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also ding the notification bell so you don't miss an upload. Also, you've been sitting here with me, Kim E, the Diabetes MP, and I am so happy that you decided to join me today, and I hope you all have a great weekend. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.